Welcome, everyone, to the December 7th, 2021 Select Board meeting. Excuse me. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Bennett to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of November 16th.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to accept the minutes as amended by the town clerk.
All right, I'll accept the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And can I ask the amendment? Is that the amendment that Kathy sent, or do you have?
No, yeah, it was the
Okay,
change of the hours for the restaurant.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Any other modifications? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. At this time of every meeting, we open this up to the public for new public business. That's any business that's not on the agenda that the public would like to bring to the attention of the Select Board. Is there anybody with new public business here tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on. Agenda item number 3, the board will consider a recommendation from the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee to proclaim January as Holocaust Education and Awareness Month and January 27th, 2021 as International Holocaust Remembrance Day in the town of Danvers. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would actually turn it over to the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, which is well represented today. I would note that this request actually first came in last year, right before the actual date. It was in January when the request was made, and we didn't have time. We encouraged them to come back this year through the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, which they did earlier this fall. And I believe it was on their agenda, and they've brought a recommendation forth to this board, and I would offer the chair, the vice chair, an opportunity to speak.
Please. Mr. DiGioco, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Dr. Jitoshen Joko. I'm the chair of the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee here in Danvers. And I'm here with the vice chair, Kristen Perkins, and a few of our members, Bob Gamer, Paul Pollack, and Bill Grant. The Danvers Holocaust Proclamation was voted on unanimously during our last month's meeting. And we are here tonight to present it to the board for consideration. We continue to be deeply concerned with the growing and persistent number of anti-Semitic incidents that we've seen in the community. And we do not want those to really define who we are as a community. So we really want to, we cannot stand by, and we want to continue to work as hard as we can to really be the best Danvers that we can be for all of us. And we believe that this proclamation will serve at least two purposes. Number one, it's a day for official commemoration of the victims of the Holocaust. And number two, a day to promote Holocaust education, as we believe education is a key in combating these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do other members of the committee who we appreciate your hard work want to say anything tonight? If not, I'll ask the Select Board representative to your committee, Select Board Judge Mills, to read a proclamation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A proclamation. We, the Select Board of the Town of Danvers, by virtue of the authority vested in us by the people of Danvers as elected officials, do hereby proclaim Thursday, January 27, 2022, as International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and recognize the month of January as Holocaust Education Month in the town of Danvers. Whereas Thursday, January 27, 2022, is International Holocaust Remembrance Day and marks the 77th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp, and whereas honoring the victims and survivors begins with our renewed recognition of the value and dignity of each person. It demands from us the courage to protect the persecuted and speak out against bigotry and hatred. And whereas on this anniversary we recommit ourselves to combating the global rise of anti-Semitism, and whereas recent acts of hate in Danvers serve as a painful reminder of our obligation to condemn and combat rising anti-Semitism in all its forms, including the denial or trivialization of the Holocaust. And whereas this anniversary is an opportunity to reflect on the progress we have made confronting this terrible chapter in human history and on our continuing efforts to end genocide. And whereas the definition of anti-Semitism reads as follows: anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Now, therefore, may it be resolved that the town of Danvers hereby recognizes January 27, 2022 as International Holocaust Remembrance Day and the month of January as Holocaust Education Month.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Mills, do you want to speak to the proclamation or to the subject at hand, sir?
To the subject that would really speak, when our committee, which was originally, I don't remember our name, it may have been the Diversity Committee, or that may have been 10 years into our history. It began as a very modest but important undertaking led by David McKenna, who was then on the board of selectmen. And it was formed in response to anti-Semitism graffiti, basically, on private property of cemeteries and on one of our public school buildings. From that time, the committee has grown into the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, chaired by Dee, with members who are present here tonight who actually are astounding in their commitment to meeting, to doing, to speaking, and being present to all issues of human rights and inclusion in our in the town of Danvers, especially at this difficult time. So I just want to say, in support of their proposed proclamation, that they do a phenomenally competent job, for which I am very grateful. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Select Board Member Duggan.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think this is important that we keep this at the forefront and to challenge anyone who denies that this event or this tragedy even occurred. We see that a lot these days, where people challenge the idea that the Holocaust is something that actually happened. So it's important that we speak out, and kudos to your group to keeping it at the forefront. Very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Select Board Member Bernard.
Thank you, Dee and the group. This is great. A lot of hard work. Like Matt said, we got to keep in front of this at all times and keep it right up there as a priority for us. Thank you.
Select Board Member Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One part of your proclamation stands out to me as very important, and that's the recognition of the value and dignity of each person, all of us, each one and another. And it's unfortunate that we have to remind people of the past. But without talking about the past, it's hard to go forwards. So I appreciate the work that your committee does, and thank you for this proclamation.
Thank you. I too wish to thank Mr. Mills for reading the proclamation, and all five of the selectmen stand firmly behind it. Select Board members stand firmly behind it. We want to thank you and your entire committee, those who might not be able to be here tonight as well, for your eternal vigilance. This is a difficult time lately in the town of Danvers, and whether it's just that there's more awareness and heightened sensitivity at this point, or it's just happened to, has been an anomaly, which we would hope, but I can't believe that there isn't more going on than is understood by the public in general. So I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. I want to thank you for the gift that you left for us, of the books, and look forward to the speaker series that are coming up. And I think, Mr. Town Manager, there is an upcoming speaker series I just got an email about, didn't I?
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest, one of the updates I was going to provide at the end of the meeting, I feel it'd be appropriate to share now.
Yes.
The board did receive this afternoon or this morning a flyer for a program that the Lappin Foundation out of Salem is sponsoring in partnership with Danvers Public Schools. And that's a Holocaust symposium in January and February of 2022. It's a free program, but space is limited to 50 individuals. The balance we're looking for is 25 students and 25 adult leaders from the community. It's conducted over the course of 6 Thursday evenings. And we will, the school community put out the opportunity through their communication network on Friday. It was shared with you today, and we'll be pushing it out to make sure that those seats are filled. But that's a free program for anybody who wants to register and participate after the holidays.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Again, we offer the opportunity for any member, you or any member of your committee to speak. We'd be happy to hear of your efforts and continued vigilance.
Thank you.
If not, thank you very much.
Thank you for your support.
Mr. Chairman, do we need a vote?
Oh, we do, I'm sorry. So a motion has been made and seconded. Thank you very much for the reminder. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Great. At this time, we will take, a public hearing will be held under Chapter 138 of the General Laws on the application of Texas Roadhouse Holdings, LLC, doing business as Texas Roadhouse, 301 Newbury Street, Justin Bourgeois, I hope I pronounced that correctly, manager for a change of manager at that location. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Andrew Upton for the licensee, and with me is Justin Bourgeois, the proposed manager of record. As you stated, Texas Roadhouse is proposing to change their manager. Justin has worked for the company since 2004. He's been in leadership positions in the Everett store, the Brockton store. He's even been selected to travel out of state to assist with store openings. He is familiar with the service of alcohol. He's familiar with the supervision of the sale and service of alcohol, and he is tips trained. And he is also here to answer any questions and readily identifiable by his Texas Roadhouse jacket.
Thank you. I will open it up and start with Select Board Member Duggan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, don't really have any questions. I just wanted to say that as a former board member of the Danvers Family Festival and also as a customer, I've always got the impression that the Danvers Texas Roadhouse was a very professionally managed business, and I'm sure that under Justin that will continue to be so. So I wish Justin success in your new in your promotion, your new title.
Thank you. Thank you. Select Board Member Bernard.
I wish you luck, Justin. I agree, too. It's a great establishment. I like how you hire a lot of kids, you know, from high school and college when they're on breaks. And thank you.
Thank you, Select Board Member Bennett.
Thank you. How many hours are you going to be on site?
I'm there 5 days a week. On average, it's 60, 65, give or take.
A lot of hours. And is there a backup manager on the license that we're aware of?
There is. It should be the same manager that's been there in the past. It's Jason Rakowskis. He's the tips manager. He's been the backup manager in the past as well. He's still there.
So somebody will be on the license on the
Yep.
premise at all times. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Select Board Member Mills.
Nothing, thank you. Good luck, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see that most of my questions I commonly ask, but you've already answered that you're tip certified and 60 hours. The clerk has indicated that the application is complete on the cover sheet. In the Everett and Chelsea stores, did you ever have a liquor license violation while you were the manager of record?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. You would be aware if you did.
Right, Mr. Chairman, to be clear, he was not the manager of record, he was a manager on staff.
Okay, all right,
The
thanks.
same answer holds.
Is this the first liquor license that you will be responsible for?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no other questions. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody of the public who'd like to speak to this application?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion made, seconded, to close the public hearing. All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll entertain a motion on the application, please.
Oh, my goodness. Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that under Chapter 138 of the general laws, we approve the application of Texas Roadhouse Holding LLC, DBA Texas Roadhouse, 301 Newberry Street, Justin Bourgeois, manager, for a change of manager at that location.
Second.
Is the motion made and seconded? Any more questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, I look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. And I too should have echoed the fact that I know that the Texas Roadhouse has been a big supporter of Operation Troop Support, as well as the Thanksgiving dinners that are presented by local residents. So thank you very much for that contribution to our community. The board will conduct the annual tax classification hearing. Mr. Town Manager, would you like to kick us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before John approaches the podium, I would ask if the board would indulge the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee while they're still here. There was one other item that they wanted to present to the board, and that is the books that are on the dais tonight.
Please, I'm sorry, I did not realize that this was it was an agenda item. I apologize.
It was not, and I also failed to share that, so.
Thank you. Please, thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Kristen Perkins, the Vice Chair of the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. And these books are being donated to you, the Select Board members, as well as the 5 are going to the library. And that's on behalf of the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. The author, Debbie Irving, was our speaker at November 17th speaker event, where we hosted a Zoom event with Debbie Irving and Shay Booley, where they explained their experiences as white and black women, both independently and collectively, as they have a friendship. And many members of our town attended. I believe it was maybe between 70 and 80 people from Danvers attended, so it was very well attended. Several of us were at the middle school, others joined online. So there was a lot of great information, different perspectives that were offered, and the book is great. Many members of our committee have read it, and we wanted to donate it to you all. So,
Thank you for the kind gift. Do appreciate it. Members of the board, any comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate it. I'll make sure it'll be my next read.
The book is called Waking Up White.
Yeah. I'm actually in the middle of a very good book called See No Strangers. And this will be the book after that. Thank you. Now, the board will continue the annual tax classification hearing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With us tonight is John LaBelle, our Chief Assessor, and in the bullpen is Rodney Conley, our Director of Finance Administration. And you received copies of the PowerPoint that will be presented tonight, as well as the report itself. In your packets last week, those materials were posted to the town website midweek last week, so that anybody in the public who wanted to follow along tonight would have a chance to digest the information. The materials probably look quite familiar to some of the board members, newer to others, but it's a set of materials that have worked well. And at this point, I would turn it over to the Chief Assessor to walk through the requests that are before the board tonight with respect to setting the FY22 tax rate.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The purpose tonight...
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, can John introduce himself to the watching public at home?
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is John LaBelle. I'm the new Chief Assessor here in Danvers.
Welcome.
So the purpose tonight is for the select board to determine an allocation of the local property tax to be borne on the 4 classes of real property plus personal property for fiscal year 2022. In deciding the allocation, the board must adopt a residential factor, which is used to determine the percentage of the tax levy to each class of real and personal property. The Board of Assessors applies these percentages to the individual property classes per Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56. In addition, the board must vote to either adopt or not adopt the shifting of taxes between residential and open space, among residential properties, also known as the residential exemption, and among commercial properties, also known as the small commercial exemption. In layman's terms, we're going to set the tax rate, and so the Board of Assessors can calculate the final tax bills. So again, these are the 5 actions required by the board that I just went over. Selecting the minimum residential factor. In doing that, you can shift from residential to commercial industrial properties. The rest of them are shifts within a particular class. And then the last, number 5, which I didn't mention, is the select board granting the Board of Assessors permission to sign on your behalf on the State Gateway Program. This slide here represents the current distribution of overall values within the town. As you can see, it's a little over 77% residential, around 16.5% commercial, a little over 4% industrial, just under 2% of personal property. And the town has no property classified as open space. I can get into that. That can be a little confusing to some people. I can touch base on that a little later on. This slide here just represents the historic distribution of values back to fiscal year 2, which is as far back as the state website goes. As you can see, in the last 4 years, the percentage of residential to commercial industrial has remained fairly constant, at around 37% for residential and around 23% for the commercial, industrial, and personal property. This slide here represents the changes in the overall valuation of each class of property. As you can see, other than the personal property, which we actually had a small decline this year, everything else is up between roughly 8 to 9%. It also indicates the parcel count difference. Overall residential properties, there were 16 new properties. Commercial, there was only 1 new one. Industrial was the same. And personal property, while we had 30 new accounts, we lost a little over 100 total for a net negative 74 personal property accounts in the town for the fiscal year. This slide here just further breaks down the breakdown of the increases in residential properties. Single family is up a little over 9.5%. Condos a little over 10%. 2 and 3 family a total 8%. But if you wanted to break that down, that's mostly 2 families. There were 3 new 2 families this year, which contributed to the growth in that overall valuation. Overall, 2 families are up 9.2% compared to last year, while 3 families are only up 3%. And the 4+ unit apartments are up just over 6% in total valuation. This slide here is just comparing this year's levy to last year's levy. You can see up at the top, Proposition 2.5 plus the new growth. And again, we're staying slightly under the total allowable levy with the actual levy limit. And if you, we'll be coming back to the actual levy number of 86.8 million in a little bit. This slide here represents the new growth over the last, I believe, 9 years. As you can see, this year, the growth was pretty evenly displaced between residential, commercial, and personal property. The last couple of years, the growth had really been mostly in the residential due to a few new small little subdivisions that are now complete. So this year, we had a little decline in the overall residential growth compared to the last couple of years, but overall, the growth number is in the ballpark of where it's been the last few years. So now we're kind of going to get into setting the minimum residential factor. A residential factor of 1 is what we call a uniform tax rate, and that's where it would be a single tax rate for both residential and commercial properties. Mass General Law permits the town to adopt a residential factor of less than 1, which have the effect of increasing commercial, industrial, and personal property while decreasing the residential tax rate. And this slide here is how we come up with that uniform tax rate. On the left is the LA4. That's a breakdown of each class of property within the town, the number of properties in each classification, the total value. And if you look down towards the bottom, circled in red, that's the total value of all real and taxable real and personal property. We take that and we divide that into the levy amount, and that gives us a tax rate of 14.44, which would be our uniform tax rate if you selected a residential factor of 1. So it's just purely a simple math equation. This slide here just represents the average single-family tax bill over the last few years and the different increases over the years. This slide here is comparing the average single-family tax bill to some of the surrounding communities as well as the state average. As you can see, where Danvers is kind of in the middle of all the surrounding communities and just slightly above the overall state average in terms of tax bill amount and single-family value, average single-family value. This slide here represents the history going back to fiscal year 2003 of what the board has elected as a shift. And again, this is another community comparison of shifts in nearby communities. There are a couple that don't shift at all. And there are a few that go up to the state max, which is 1.75. Based on the state formula, Danvers max is still at 1.5. And that's based on single-family, residential properties needing to make up at least 65% of the levy, of their share of the levy. So this slide here is you have a larger spreadsheet of the potential shifts. This year is just a slight representation, representation of kind of where the board has shifted in the past in the ballpark range. And again, you should have with your packet a full list of all the potential available shifts. Do you want me to go into these now, the other, or do you want to talk about the residential shift now?
We can talk about the other four,
Yep.
and then
Go back?
And
Okay.
we'll come back and talk about each of those. We'll probably knock off the other four first, and then dive deep into the individual resident,
All right.
individual classification.
This is by far the easiest one, the open space discount. as I
Mr.
said
Chairman, I'm sorry, could I make a comment before
Sure,
we
sure.
continue on?
Yes,
I just want to thank John for the presentation and say that I appreciate the breakdown showing us residential, condominium, multifamilies. Sometimes in the past, we just had a one figure for residential, and it really doesn't tell the whole story. My background is real estate, and I understand the difference in values between those different categories, so I appreciate you pointing that out to us specifically. There certainly was a large drop-off on personal property folks, and you did supply me, Rodney did the list of those folks that moved out of town, went out of business. Many of them were small businesses. I was surprised at the number of them, not necessarily the particular ones that were on that list, but it's just probably a blip in time where there was a lot of lost people going out of business or closing the business. And I guess we'll blame COVID, as we'll be doing for a couple of years. And the other thing I liked is the selection of communities that you used to show where we stand. I think it was a good reputation of like-minded or likewise communities. So thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments before we move on to the other 4 decisions we need to make? Please.
Okay. As I said, open space discount is pretty much the easiest one of the decisions you have to make. While a lot of people think there's a lot of open space in Danvers, this is referring to what the state classifies as open space. The open space that's here in town is actually classified in another way. It's either town-owned land, state-owned land, or it's private land that's held in chapter status for agricultural use or recreational use. So at the moment, there's no open space, so legally, you still have to make a motion and either adopt one or don't adopt a discount, but no matter what you decide to do, it's really not going to have any impact on individuals' tax bills. So we'll just kind of skip over that one for now. The residential exemption, it's kind of a misnomer. It's more of a residential shift. After you adopt the residential factor, that establishes how much residential properties are going to pay of the levy as opposed to commercial, industrial, and personal property. This is a shift within that. So historically, you've been around the 67%, so just for argument's sake and illustration, if you, again, shifted to that 67%, this is just shifting that 67%. So in a town like, we don't track owner-occupied properties in town at the moment, but just based on mailing addresses, it's around 89% of the residential properties we mail the bill to their address. So we'll make an assumption that 89% of the residential properties in town are owner-occupied for this example. So what you would be doing, if you adopted this, you would be shifting some of the burden onto that 11% that's not owner-occupied, but you would also be shifting it from the lower valued properties onto higher valued properties. So, and again, based on average values, condominium owners would probably see a bigger break than single-family owners if you adopted a residential exemption. And then the last one is the small commercial exemption. Up on the board is the requirements for it. Property has to be under $1 million in total valuation, and the business cannot have more than 10 employees that are full-time. Again, roughly 12% of the commercial properties in town are valued over $1 million. So you'd be looking at potentially 88% of the commercial properties being able to at least apply for this. We don't currently track employee numbers and things like that, so I couldn't tell you how many would actually qualify for it. Again, this is shifting the burden from some commercial properties onto your higher, more valued commercial properties.
And if I could add on to what John just said for this one. So the board has never adopted any of these, but in particular on this one, his predecessor, Steve Poulos, and Steve's predecessor, Marlene Locke, pointed out two things. One, this would add a considerable amount of work to the office, to the point that we'd probably be understaffed to try to manage something like this. And another issue that they, both of his predecessors noted, is that the benefits of this, I believe, accrue to the owner and not owner of the building, not necessarily the business in the building. So you'd be
Correct. It
adjusting
goes
the
to
tax
the,
rate,
it goes
not
to
to
the
the benefit of
property
the
owner,
business.
not the business owner, so it would depend on how their lease is written as to whether or not the business owner would actually get the benefit of the exemption.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
So,
I have a question.
yep, one
Yep,
second.
that's it, yep.
So I'm sorry, did you want?
No, the last one is just you giving me permission to sign for you, so.
Okay. So we have 5 motions ahead of us, and I will say that based on, and a lot of us have heard the presentation, and thank you for it again. Thank you for the clarity, the annual tweaks. The motions 2 through 5 are fairly straightforward. I'd like to suggest that we take those now individually, discuss them and vote them, and then go back to the minimum residential factor. They aren't linear. They don't build upon each other. They are distinct and separate from each other. Is that all right with people? Board members, are we okay with that? Okay.
I have a question about the residential exemption.
Sure, let's start. So let's start first with the motion to adopt or not adopt an open space discount. When we get to that, for each of
Okay.
these, we'll open it up for questions. So there is a motion to adopt or not adopt an open space discount. Can I have a motion to?
Motion not to adopt open space discount.
Great. And seconded. Now we can, any discussion or questions on that motion, please?
So from the material that I saw, that's something that the board has never adopted that, correct?
Correct, we have never adopted it, and it's based on the fact that we don't, by the classification provided by the state, have
Right.
open space to adopt.
That's
or
what I
not.
thought, yep, okay.
And it's based purely on the state's definition of that.
Right.
Any other questions on that? And if I forget to jump
No,
in, I
that's
know
good.
we have new people, new to the process, and jump in with any questions you may have.
Well, it sounds like a good idea, like you would want to give a discount to open space to help preserve it, but it doesn't sound like this is the way that you would go about that.
Right.
Okay.
All right, the motion is made not to adopt the open space discount. Any more questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to
Mr.
grant.
Chairman, I make a motion that we not grant a residential exemption.
There's a motion made to not grant the residential exemption. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Seconded. Now we'll open that one for discussion. Please.
Right, so I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Conley and Mr. LaBelle last Thursday with Select Board Member Bernard. And so we went through some of this material. For the residential exemption, it seems like that's something we may want to adopt at some point. Can you just, through you, Mr. Chairman, if you could explain how we've already sort of collected some funds that might enable us to adopt this?
No, those funds, that's for something else.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll get that that's kind of a bonus at the end.
okay,
That-
all right,
That doesn't have anything to do with the residential exemption.
I see, okay. I'm kind of new to this, so I'm just learning as I go.
Mr. King.
One of the things we did mention, sorry, Rodney Conley, Finance Director, one of the things we did mention, we do offer a true exemption for elderly disabled veterans. So we have those exemptions that are actual true abatements of the tax bill available.
I see, okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions on this motion? Please get them out so you can, all right. No other questions? All in favor to not grant the residential exemption?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion not grant a small commercial exemption.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Are there questions on this small commercial exemption? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion, a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
You want to do number 5 now?
Sure.
Motion to grant authority to the Board of Assessors, I believe, is it the Board of Assessors or the chairperson?
Chairperson.
Chairperson of the Board of Assessors to sign on behalf of the Select Board.
Second. Motion's made and seconded. Is there any questions on this motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then I will move back to adopting a minimum residential factor. I think we'll have discussion, and then we'll entertain a motion when we kind of see what the rates are.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
You may?
Thank you. A little history, the past year or so. Last year, we voted to, I guess the word is forgive liquor license fees for all license holders, which was a value of $176,000 or so. Last year, Danvers restaurants received $7.66 million from the Small Business Administration Restaurant Revitalization Fund, anywhere from $7,000 up to $4.298 million restaurants received. I have the list if anybody's interested. Danvers, the PPP loans that were granted was in excess of 98.6 million. People getting in excess of 5 million, Kelly's Automotive, Mortgage Network, 2 others. There are 8 companies that got between 2 and 5 million, and it goes down the list for a total of 712 PPP loans, many of which were forgiven. The town of Danvers was allocated $8,200,000 or more from the American Rescue Plan to improve physical infrastructure, reduce pressure on free cash, enhance services, one-time funds for capital projects, mitigate the impact of the pandemic. And just $500,000 from that $8 million was left over for individuals and additional small businesses. We have an opportunity this year, maybe just one time, to help our residents by setting the tax rate at 1.50 this year. And that is my motion, that we set the rate at 1.50, which would give our residents, single-family homes, an increase at $89, condominiums $44, multifamilies $12, and it would impact the commercial and industrial folks who already received, not all, but many of them, totaling millions of dollars. And I think it would be fair this year to take that into consideration when we set the residential factor. And that's my motion.
Motion made? Second. And seconded. I'll start, thank you. Do you want to speak to yours more, or you?
No, I pretty much laid out what happened in the past and not the benefits that these businesses received. The federal government was very generous with our tax dollars, and these businesses suffered to a degree, but they were helped to be held whole to a certain degree, where our residents really received very little support. I'm sure some of the renters out there received some funds from rental assistance, but landlords received nothing. And the residential taxpayers paid their taxes, but I'm sure they've had to give up something else. I mean, now it's, do you pay for gas, do you pay for food, do you pay for clothing? And I just think it'd be a way for us to help the community at large by doing this.
Select Board Member Bernard.
I love sitting beside Select Board Member Bennett with all his information. I agree with him, too. If we can somehow not increase it so much for the residents, for the taxes, for the residential, I mean, it has to go up a little bit, but like Dan said, a lot of the commercial did receive a lot of those PPP loans. A lot of them got forgiven. Companies, you know, got their money to keep their employees going. They did get forgiven. So I'm gonna join Dan with that same residential rate.
Select Board Member Mills.
I agree.
Select Board Member Duggan.
Yeah, there's a different perspective that I have. So many residents received stimulus checks, multiple stimulus checks in some cases of, I think individuals could receive up to $1,200 at a time. So the PPP loans for the businesses, stimulus checks for the residents, kind of a wash for me. And I'm concerned about going up to, we're talking about a factor of 1.5, which is the highest we can go, I believe.
That's the highest we can go without a further vote. 175 is,
175 is the, yeah.
yeah,
we've
other,
taken
other
that.
cities do
Well,
that.
that's a dramatic increase over what the factor was over the past decade or more. I think, what's the current factor is 1.407?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's, I wouldn't be in favor of going, once you go up to 1.5, you really can't come back, from my understanding of how this works. What would be the, what would be the increase again for the residential rate, which is currently
$89,
Or 1.33%.
1.33%.
and what would be the increase for commercial?
$3,258 and 9.12%.
Mm-hmm.
And what's that rate per thousand? Do you have it broken down by thousand?
It would be, residential would be $20.53, and the.
No.
That's the
12.
commercial.
12.30.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
commercial.
13.35 it is,
CIP would be $20.53, and residential would be $12.66.
So the residential would have be,
Actually goes down from the
would go down
$13.35.
$1 per thousand?
Yeah, it goes down, but
The
realize
values
that
are
your
up. Right.
everybody's property increased over 9%.
Yeah, I understand that. So I'm kind of in favor of that 2/3, 1/3 kind of thing, where you've mentioned before the tide, rising tide, kind of, I can't see going that high. Is there a way to compromise?
Mr. Chairman,
So if I
could,
could have my comments
Yep,
first
you may.
before you.
Yep.
So, as I've said each year, there are many ways to split this. There's no rhyme, there's no formulaic way to say why we have classification. It's subjective. It has been for 20 years since we went away from the uniform classification. More than 20 years. It was well before I was on the board, and there are many ways that you could consider, how do you split this thing? You know, how do you charge different people different rates? Now, if we split it evenly on the 1.0 classification, it's a detriment to the residents. They're gonna go up $1,000 or 18%, and the businesses are gonna nosedive. They're gonna go down 27%. That's not gonna fly. And we're never gonna go back to a 1.0 classification, because like you said, once you pass that threshold, you're not gonna tell people, oh, we're gonna go back to 1.0. That's really not on the table. We have split it historically in many years, 66-34, which even though the residents are 77% of the value, the $6 billion in this town, we've said, let's do a 66-34 split and split it that way. Unfortunately for that, this year the calculations drive it to above 1.5, actually. It drives it to above 1.5 factor. You could split on consumption, and no one would ever do that, saying, what do you consume? Like, if you went to dinner, and you split the bill, and you only had a salad, and I had a full 5-course meal, you could split on consumption, but businesses don't use the schools, they don't use the library, they don't use retirement funds, they don't use debt services, they don't use the health insurance, they don't use Essex Tech as well, which leaves only 18% of the budget, 29% of the budget is general funds, if you take all those out. So again, you would skyrocket the residents if you tried to say, pay for what you consume. That's off the table. You could try to say, let's leave it at 1.4, you know, the same rate we have now, the same factor we have now, 1.4071. Again, you would increase the residents 0.43% and increase the businesses 2.37. Or you could say, keep it at the same rate. If you kept it at the same rate, we've already seen the rate goes down because of the values going up. So that's not it. But if you look at the spreadsheets, the very detailed spreadsheets that were provided, when I say the tide should rise both boats, if you say that the percentage increase for both were the same, meaning based on their value, what percentage should both rise, you would get to a factor of 1.422, where the average resident would go up $209 or 3.54%, and the average business would go up $1,225 or 3.43%. Basically, percentage-wise, they both gained in value this year, which sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes you have one goes up, the other goes down. This year, they both gained value of roughly 9%. So if they're both rising and the tax burden has increased, I'm thinking that the percentage that they pay, their proportionate percentage, would raise them both at 1.422. I'm going to disagree with Dan's premise, a couple of things. One is, not every business got a PPP loan, and PPP loans were to try to keep them afloat, try to keep them from closing. We had many businesses suffer, even who got PPP loans, that didn't keep them whole, it didn't keep them fully functioning, it kept them able to keep the doors open. I can speak to Breakaway. I know that they got some PPP loans, and I know that they were forgiven, but that kept their workforce getting a paycheck. They didn't make the profits. They didn't make the profits they made the previous years. And those that you've mentioned, Dan, even though it's a high number of millions of dollars, many of them went to just the very largest of businesses, Danversport, Kelly's, Walmart's, those.
I would disagree with that. D got $18,000.
How much?
$18,000.
I didn't hear who you said.
The Thai restaurant.
Okay, the Thai restaurant.
And across the street, they got $43,000.
Okay, but.
Boardside Diner got $119,000.
Okay.
Nine Elm, $268,000. Cakes for Occasion, $302. Cookie Monster, $587,000. So it's not just small, it was spread out.
It was spread out, but it wasn't spread out to every business in this town. I can tell you the Polish Club is hurting tremendously because they didn't do PPP loans. And they had every opportunity to do it. I know that many people got turned down for them. You can't suggest that the PPP loans kept those businesses at the same level of profitability. It kept them alive, and many it didn't keep alive. And if you go to 1.5 now, you're going to hear the backlash when you try to back off that later. So I can't recommend going to that taxing to the max. We've got people in town who constantly say, we tax to the max, we tax to the max, when it isn't true. We don't. We stay under our levy limit or have consistently throughout the years. This would be taxing to the max. And I just cannot see doing this one time and then telling people next year that they're going to go up hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I think it's fair to say everybody was harmed in some way, but I'll tell you right now, I wasn't harmed in the pandemic. I kept my job all through the pandemic. My wife kept her job all through the pandemic. There were many people who were not harmed either. So the presumption that residents were unduly harmed when businesses weren't because some of them got PPP loans, I think is a false narrative, personally. Unless you can tell me every business in town got some sort of support that kept them stable or profitable, I can't support the fact that we're now going to hit them up for more. Proportionally, if you go 1.50, you're only saying I'm going to go up the residents half of 1%, but I'm going to increase the businesses 9.1%. And I can't support a 1.5 classification. I won't make, I would go with a 1.4220, which rises both of them just about 3.5%.
But if I may, the motion on the table is for
I understand.
1.50.
I'm not offering an amendment. I'm saying this is what my desire would be if it were my desire. And I'm saying I'm not going to support a 1.50.
And if I may, I don't know how many people lost daycare and had to give up a second job. I don't know how many people earn less than $150,000 adjusted as a family, which enable them to receive a stimulus check that Mr. Duggan referred to, which combined might have been enough to pay 1/4 of their tax bill. Certainly not enough to cover even half their year's tax bill. So there is a disparity. There was the difference between what many businesses, and I can't say to all businesses, received and what the taxpayers received. I can't give you all those figures. But we do know that there was Small Business Administration revitalization funds, there were PPP loans. The town of Danvers received money from the American Rescue Plan. This new Build Back America bill, the federal money that the state has to give out, they're going to give Danvers the $150,000, as was just announced today, for us to fund our strategic plan study, which is nice. But it doesn't do anything to help the taxpayers. And I think all through this, it's what can we do for the taxpayers? We did what we could for businesses. We gave them the ability to open up downtown with the outdoor seating. We did whatever we logically could do to help those businesses, in many cases, including your friend at Breakaway. I just think this is the right thing to do this year. And to say that we're going to go to 150 and we can't put up with a backlash next year, you're caving in already. If there's backlash, so be it. That's why we're here. And I think it's the right thing to do.
My feeling is, just to answer your point, that the residents of this town were not disproportionately harmed than the businesses. And the businesses are taxpayers. We're here to represent both. And, realizing that they don't have a vote, they don't get to vote on who's going to lead the town. But I do not believe that the residents were disproportionately harmed more than the businesses. Livelihood went out. We always are concerned about the seniors. That's obviously paramount to us. But those seniors who were on a fixed income and had a fixed income going along didn't lose that fixed income. They didn't, nothing about the pandemic increased their costs, and their income was stable. Now, I can't say, obviously not everybody's income was stable, but I still think that you're presuming a disproportionate amount of harm happened to the residents over the businesses, and I disagree. I think it's the other way around. I think businesses were more disproportionately harmed, closed, workers were laid off and out of work when all these businesses couldn't open up at all, than the residents who, you're right, may have lost a second job, may have lost daycare. But I still think that is proportionately, I think the heavy end's on the commercial CIP side of the scale. I'm sorry.
So just so everybody's clear, Select Board Bennett's proposing 1.50, which would increase single family to about $89, right?
48.
No.
No, I'm sorry.
89.
I was looking, I
Yeah.
averaged all three.
So your proposal doing 1.42, what would that amount to?
The average residential, and I averaged single-family condo and multifamily would go up 209.
Yeah, see, I don't want to increase the residents either.
But you'd also disproportionately increase businesses, 1.225.
So what was the bit?
Hold on,
Yeah.
1.225. If you went up to tax to the max, the businesses are going to go up $3,258 per business, per average business.
Versus?
Versus 1.225. What you're saying is so you're just basically saying we're gonna go to the max against the business, yet people it's easy to think about the big box businesses, the Walmarts, the 114 businesses. We're talking about Ohm at Kathmandu. We're talking about the yoga shops that are opening. We're talking about the coffee shops, the Roccos, the Sam and Joe's. All of these are other businesses that
Excuse me, do they own those buildings, or are they leasing them?
Some are owning, some
Well,
are
that's
leasing.
right. So many of those are leased.
Well, there's a motion on the floor for 1.50. Is there more discussion on the 1.50? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No.
Motion fails. I'll make a motion that a motion to adopt a minimum residential factor of 1.4220, which would increase residents by 3.5, the combined residents of single-family, condo, and multifamily by 3.5%, increase the businesses by 3.43%.
Okay, now what's that rate again?
So 1.4220.
220.
Yep. Which is obviously higher than our current 1.407. So 1.4220, just for clarity. The average single family would go up 269.28, or 4.404%. The average condo would go up 161, or 3.73%. The average two-family would go up 196, or 2.86%. And I'm pulling this right out of straight from the spreadsheet, and no recalculation. And then the average business would go up 1.225, or 3.4%. If you average the three single-family condominiums and two-family, they go up 3.5%. And the average of that would be $209.
And if I may, Gardner, conversely, 1.4280 would be a 3.79% increase for single-family and 3.83% for businesses.
Sorry, what did you just say?
1.4280.
Let me just, I filtered.
14280.
Yeah, I'm going to just expand my spreadsheet because I filtered to show mine. That's blanks. So 1.4280, as I look at it, the average single would go up 379, the average business would go at 388, and then 3.49 across and 2.6. But if you average the three types of residential together, it's 3.30 increase for those three combined versus 3.88. Again, the tide's rising, it isn't rising both boats equally. If you do that, you're right, it's the same all the way through. Anytime you go above the 1.4220, you can see that now proportionately, one's going higher, one's rising a little bit more, and the other one's not rising as fast. Residential's not rising as fast as soon as we start going above 1.4220. But your numbers are right, Dan.
Well, then I'll make a motion that we go to 1.4280.
I think I made a motion for 1.4.
Well, you were making an argument. I didn't hear a
No,
motion
I did.
or
I
a
said
second.
I'll make a motion for
Okay.
14220. Did I get a second on the motion? I got a second on by Mr. Mills.
Second.
So discussion on that motion, and is there, if you want to talk about your suggestion, Dan?
No, I suggested something, and you have a motion on the table.
All right. There's a motion on the table. Is there more discussion on?
Yep.
On one? Yes, please.
So do we have a breakout on the percentages between the two, between the residential, like you mentioned before, like a 66 and a 34%? Do we have something? Can we
Hold on, yeah. I
get
can-
just a rough estimate?
Yep, I can. If you have that number, but I just have to,
I have it, dude.
Thank you.
For, what were you talking about, the 220?
1.4220, what
Okay.
is the residential split versus the commercial split?
The residential is 67.8359. And I have to follow it across.
32.x. So 67.32. If you went 66.34, you'd actually be above 1.50. Because of the fact that both businesses and residents went up in value, this is pretty much the same.
Mr. Chairman, can we ask John what the breakdown is, 14.280?
4280?
Yep.
That is 67.7002 for the residential.
So it'd be 32.3, just under 32.3. So 67.8 versus 67.7 residential versus between the two rates, 4.280 is 67.7.
Okay, thank you.
32.3. So, any other questions on,
Yeah, I
or
had
discussion
just-
on the motion?
Yeah, just a question for Mr. LaBelle. So how does this factor into how much money we actually need to raise through property taxes? So we have the money that town meeting authorized to spend, and then we deduct revenues from like excise taxes, fees. That leaves us with the tax levy, the money that we actually need to collect from property owners. So how does that factor into what we're deciding now? We're just deciding the percentage for that tax levy amount?
Correct. It's the percentage of the levy, not the percentage of the overall budget.
So do we know what that number is, the actual levy? Is that here on the 86 million?
Yeah, it's the 86 million number from this
From
slide. here.
page 9?
That circle, yeah.
Oh.
Or on 12, it's the red circled one.
12.
And again, depending on where you shift, there's some rounding, so that could go up like $10, $12, depending on where exactly you land, but
Okay.
just based on the rounding.
And I would say, to state it differently, based on the budget that was approved in May, all other revenue sources coming in on budget, that's the tax levy that's required to balance the budget.
Right.
So as we get into the tax recap each year and the year-end closeout, it never ends up being that number exactly, but it's within, hundreds of a point of that number, because we have to operate within the levy limit. But you're correct, that the budget gets set, you make best case assumptions about your other revenues, and then you back into your levy, and then this process is to allocate that levy across the different property classes.
Okay. All right, thank you for that explanation, I appreciate it.
And I guess what I was trying to say is, if you look at page 7, at the bottom, you can see the total residential value went up 9.45. But we're only increasing the taxes at the rate I'm suggesting, 3.5. We're not trying to keep up with the rise in value. And the same thing for if you average out the commercial industrial property, they're actually about they're about 8.2. Their value went up 8.2. Again, we're increasing their taxes proportionately. And so I'm trying to, like you said, make this as even as possible as far as a percentage of the value they achieved. So each has so much value in this town, and I'm trying to rise them both the same,
Right.
and that's the factor I came up with.
And I think you'd see that if you did some research, which I'm sure they have, that the increase in residential properties has been more dramatic than it has for commercial, I think, across, not just for Danvers, but for across the region, so.
Oh, and I'll also suggest, and you can confirm, that this is based on values from fiscal year 2020.
Based on calendar year data
Calendar year
from 2020.
And we've seen explosive residential this year. And that's one of the things we're going to experience with COVID is commercial industrial property values are not going to go up as quickly as the residential has, because people understand they don't have to fill a building with brick and mortar building with people to know that they're productive and have working.
Right.
I can tell you, because I'm in the business, that you would know this too. The commercial per square footage in Boston has plummeted for commercial property. And we're going to see that next year. We're going to see less of a even increase on both sides. So, but that's next year's classification. We're always behind.
And just one last point, not really directly related to the motion, but for people at home. So we know that Danvers Patriot Properties has the valuations, but that is for 2020 calendar year?
What's currently on the website is fiscal year '21 values.
On your website?
Yeah.
So that doesn't correlate with Patriot Properties though, right? There's a,
Patriot Properties currently is still showing fiscal year '21. It hasn't been updated yet. If you go to the Assessors
Yeah, I
portion
did
of the
that.
website,
Yep.
I have uploaded a PDF link of the current values.
yeah, I
that
see
you can
that.
look at.
So that looks like that would be those figures would be what would be migrated into Danvers Patriot Properties on
Correct.
January 1st?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I just mentioned that for people at home that may want to do some research, that know that what the spreadsheet that you created on your website, on the assessor's link on the town's website, has more current information as of last
Right,
month.
those are finalized values that have been approved by the state.
Great, okay, all right. That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. I have another question about general classification, but it can come after the motion. It's unrelated to the motion. Motion on the floor for 1.4220. Any more discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
That passes at 1.4220. If I get two comments one comment and you can validate. One of the things is we set the rate in November or December, which means the next tax bill will actually be two quarters of tax bill, will it not?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Because we set it this late in the year, we've already, so this is to cover the budget that started July 1st and will go through to the end of June of next year.
Correct.
Which means we're actually, in what a lot of the discussion comes up, the meal was ordered in May by town meeting. They decided on the budget. This is not affecting the budget number. This doesn't say that this is how we're now divvying up the check that was written in May by the town meeting members who decided that we were going to set a budget that paid for certain things. Now that we're doing it and the check is so late, now that the checks come to our table, we got to pay it. We're 2 quarters into that year, so the next tax bill, will that reflect 2 quarters of increase?
No.
No?
No. The next bill that you get in January will reflect whatever tax rate you set today.
Yeah.
The first 2 quarters are an estimate based on what you paid last year plus 2.5%.
So there's an adjustment.
There is an adjustment on the 3rd and 4th quarter, depending on where we end up. It could go up, could go down, depending on what you actually paid.
So when people see their bill in January, it is not reflective of the fact that that's a quarter's worth of their bill. It is that quarter plus the delta between the estimates.
Correct. What you would need to do is take the total amount that's on the bill,
Yeah.
divide it by 4, and that would give you your 4 quarters of what it would have been had we done this at the beginning of the fiscal year, which is impossible.
Okay, I just want people to realize that when they see their bill in January, it doesn't reflect an exact quarterly division of 4. They've already paid a chunk of that.
Correct.
As an estimate, okay. The other question is there a legal or some reason that we actually wait this long, this long into the year to set the classification? Could we do it right after the town meeting chooses a budget? Is there numbers you don't get from the state until a certain time frame that forces us to wait this long?
Yeah, it all depends on, well, we could theoretically do it a little sooner, but we couldn't do it in May, June. The valuation date is January 1st, but the town adopted something called Chapter 653. That allows me to pick up new growth as of June 30th, as if it were there on January 1st. Okay, so I can't get the growth number until at least July. All right, but then, we have to finalize all the values, get those approved by the state. So
you still have at least 1 month of estimated bill, as opposed to
the first
a 1 quarter of
the first
estimate.
2 quarter bills are always going to be an estimate.
Yeah, okay. All right.
We could bump this up a month or 2, maybe, if everything goes
Yeah,
perfect.
last year we did it in November, because I'm
Yeah.
only looking at last year's
Right.
notes and seeing that we did it in November,
Right,
as opposed to December.
yeah. November's typically the earliest some people do. There are a couple of small communities that do it a lot earlier,
Yeah.
but I think they only do twice-a-year bills. They don't do the quarterly bills, so.
I just
it's a
want to
little
know if there
different.
was a mechanical reason, and I think you said that there was.
Part of it's just getting the values done and getting the growth in and all that sort of thing, so.
Very good. Is there any other questions about classification at this point? I think that we've done all 5 of the motions. I want to thank you for the detail work that goes into this. As you can see, that some of us are real statistical wonks and go right in, deep into the spreadsheet, so thank you for that.
Okay.
It helps us make an informed decision.
I just want to make one note, just to be perfect. You adopted a shift of 1.422. The residential factor is actually 0.8766,
Okay?
because that's under the 1.
Okay.
That's not on your spreadsheet, but I just wanted to
Very
clarify
good.
that the shift, the commercial shift is 1.422. The residential factor is 0.876.
Right, it's the, yeah, right, okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Before we move on, if you look at the last, actually, John, if you want to advance to the last slide, something that John discovered after settling in has to do with the fact that the town adopted a section of state law back in 2000, which allowed for voluntary contributions into a fund to be used potentially for tax relief above and beyond the statutory exemptions that the finance director referenced a little while ago. What he discovered was folks have been paying modest amounts into that fund for many years. The boards in the thousands never took the second step to create a group to disperse those funds. Now, turn it over to John to describe that in a little more detail, and then I think we're looking for some guidance from the board tonight in terms of whether this is something they would like to take up.
All right, so basically this committee, by state law, has to be made up of myself, the town treasurer, and then 3 members appointed by the select board. And that committee would then come up with parameters as to who could qualify to receive some of this money and how much money we would give them. So it's in addition to the statutory exemptions that would be available. Again, it's funded by voluntary contribution. So we just need you to think about it in the coming months to, who you want to place on this committee, so we can go forward and start distributing these funds that have been sitting in the bank for a while.
And just for context, so there's those who have mortgages, which is probably most folks, wouldn't necessarily see the box that gets checked because their banks are paying their real estate taxes. But folks who are paying taxes have an opportunity on their tax bill to make a contribution as little as $1. So in the past 21 years, we've accrued, I think, somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 in this fund.
Yeah, I'm not sure exact number. It's around
Give or
there.
take.
Yeah.
So it's not a large amount of money, it doesn't grow fast, but there is an opportunity, if the board wanted to establish this committee, to have them come back with some thoughts on how to use portions of this fund annually. And again, there are already established exemption categories in Danvers through state law for elderly, disabled, veteran, et cetera. These funds would almost be like you could think of it as extending off one end or the other of those existing exemptions. For example, and we talked about this last week, your assets may qualify you for one of the state exemptions, but perhaps you're 2 or 3 years away from qualifying on an age basis. The committee could set criteria to offer some sort of relief to people in that category, or perhaps you're old enough, but you have a retirement plan that pays you enough that you wouldn't qualify necessarily for under the asset category. So there are a lot of different things, but it's not a large amount, but it's something that John wanted to make sure that the board was aware of and had a chance to offer him some guidance on.
So average-wise, we bring in between $1,500 and $2,000 a year.
Yeah,
I just divided the
Yeah.
30 to 40 by 21 years,
Right.
so. Okay. Board members, what are your thoughts on this? I realize you may be getting hit cold with this, and we can defer this and talk about it at the next meeting, if you want to noodle on it.
I'll nibble on it for a minute.
Okay.
It's not advertised. not many people know about it. If it was better known, they may check off more people may check off the box. One thing, and that fund may grow. But I think it makes sense to put together this committee to look at what can be done with these funds going forwards and how to increase the funds. So I'm in favor of moving forwards tonight, and ask the town manager to go ahead and have this committee set up, bring us some names of some folks that we can appoint. I see no reason to drag it out.
I'm comfortable with that. Other board members, thoughts?
I agree.
The board members want to throw out potential names or candidates. For example, I would suggest perhaps someone from the Cultural Council would be a good person to be on this board. Or maybe even, or the Danvers Housing Authority. Not the trust, but the
Authority, yeah.
Danvers Housing Authority. I can see Kiwanis, but then you talk about Lions and you can talk about some of the other service organizations. Do people have ideas about who they would want on this
Senior
committee?
Center, someone affiliated with the Senior Center?
I like that, yeah.
I think this is great. I didn't know about
We
this.
we need to create the committee, otherwise this money is just sitting there, not doing any good for anyone. And I
So
think
it'd be 3 residents, so it's the Board of Assessor Chair, the Town Treasurer, and 3 residents. In this case, I would actually recommend, that we don't need a select board member representative at this.
No, I think 3 residents leaves it to non-elected officials. I don't want to get involved in who I'm giving money to. Want to take it from them make them pay their taxes and then give them back $5. No. The 3 residents, I think anybody that's willing to serve
Sure.
and has some background would be qualified.
Very good. Any other ideas? Okay, Mr. Town Manager would take that as a task to.
I would, and I would ask John an unfair question, and that's whether there is is there a timing, is there an important date annually, once this committee's operating, by which they'd want to make recommendations or offer relief as part of our tax cycle?
I would suggest you do it in the same time frame as the statutory exemptions.
Makes sense. So we can definitely, I'll meet with these guys and Jill, the treasurer, and we will come back, if not at the next meeting, maybe one of the January meetings, with some more details on the process and the parameters.
Very good. Thank you. Is that it on this agenda item? Mr. Town Manager?
I believe it is.
Rodney, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
John, congratulations, surviving your first
You survived the
classification.
first one. Hooray. All right. The board has requested to renew liquor licenses for calendar year 2022 as per the attached. We've got a spreadsheet of liquor licenses. Mine. Oh, I got it there. I just have to find it. Is there, are there any liquor licenses that people want to pull out individually, or I can entertain a motion for all of them?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should talk about the Polish Club before we take a vote. I mean, I don't have a problem taking a general vote on everything, but we should discuss the Polish Club.
Okay?
Either pull it out and discuss it after everything else is approved, or whatever your
I'm
your
fine with
wishes.
that.
Any- okay.
Now, will your discussion be around the Polish Club specifically, or social clubs in town, of which this is the only one left?
So the answer is yes to both.
Okay,
It's-
okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to make sure there's no other category, no other group in the category of club. Oh, there's not, and the clerk tells me there's not. That is the only That is the only one in clubs. The Elm Club has foregone, they've given up their license, and the Chucks gave up their license, and we know that the Masons don't have one. So if the motion is to forego all clubs, which will then be only the Polish Club, would you like to make a motion on everybody but clubs?
So moved.
Okay, the motion is to accept the renewal of liquor license for all categories and holding aside clubs for other discussion.
Second.
And, Mr. Mills, was that a second or a question?
It's going to be a comment after a second, whether I'll make the second or
Okay.
Maureen
Fine.
did, whatever.
Either way, okay. Comment, sir.
I'm concerned that the police, I always like, every year I ask, has this list been run by the police? And have the police, reported problems with any one of these licensees? Just giving a blank approval without having any input from the police department always troubles me just a little bit.
If I might suggest, we, as the licensing board, would know of any issues that are outstanding. We've had two, which we've dealt with recently, and provided for, I don't want to call it resolution. We took action on two. Other than that, I'm not sure, and based on history with the chief would actually not take a position. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question's been posed in the past, and we have actually run it by council. We've had instances in years past where there have been violations or pending hearings and action underway at the time of renewal. And council and the ABCC have advised that you really want to treat those as separate processes. So the view is to renew the license and deal with the infraction separate from the license renewal, and that withholding the license would not be appropriate as part of an ongoing hearing or case against a particular licensee.
Okay, I'm good with that.
And as I understand it, of this list, leaving aside clubs, there are no businesses for which they still hold a liquor license but are not open at this time. Is that accurate?
The only one is Twisted Fate is not yet open.
Not yet
I
open.
did include them on this list because
Sure.
the board has approved it, but it's still pending ABCC. But I
Okay.
wanted to include it so that it would be set for 2022.
Just out of curiosity, did they get charged a full liquor license fee already? Well, they just came before us last month, or?
Their license hasn't been approved, so they can't open. They're not planning to open until 2022.
Great.
They've
So-
given me a check, but I have not cashed that check.
Very good.
It
But it
would go
would
to
get applied
next
to
year.
2022.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So the motion on the floor is to approve all, leaving out clubs at the moment, for renewal. Is there any more discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Bennett, as you asked us to carve aside clubs, would you like to make a comment?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, perhaps to the clerk, what is the rule or the terminology for a entity to serve liquor without a manager of record?
The Polish Club had that appeal on the manager. While that appeal is pending, the board of the Polish Club would serve as the manager. You would not penalize them for having the appeal.
Okay, now that the manager of record they recommended has left the employee of the establishment, where does that leave them?
The vice president of the Polish Club, John Swiniarski, correct me if I'm, came into the office last week, and they are expected to have a new applicant for the next meeting on the 21st.
For our next meeting.
For our next meeting on the 21st, yes.
So I'm just curious, we haven't approved anybody because nobody's come before us. So they're able to operate.
Yes. The board of the Polish Club assumes the responsibility for the liquor license
Okay.
for the ABCC.
Okay,
The appeal has been dropped and dismissed by the ABCC. I got confirmation of that on the 3rd.
so should we not wait till we have that applicant before us, before we grant their license for next year? Is my question. They're operating legally now
Yeah, they're operating legally
now,
now as the board of directors.
and through the rest of this year.
Correct. My concern to your thought would be that if they come before us next, at the next meeting, it's still going to take mechanically some time, independent of our decision, to accept their applicant or not. That carries them into 2022,
Well, we'll have their application, we'll approve it or deny it.
but the
Next.
ABCC then has to do the same. My suggestion is they are currently working under the ABCC, because, and the reason I'm weighing in is because I did ask the town clerk this 6 months ago when the whole appeal happened. They have the right to continue to operate with the board of directors as the assigned responsible party until they replace the manager within a reasonable amount of time. During the appeal, that was obviously
Okay.
reset the clock. Now that we have that letter, which is only a week or so old, they've said, we're gonna apply with a new person. And I would err on the side of giving them the license, and if something were to happen, we can always call them back as the licensing authority. But if we pass, we pass, and ABCC then takes their time to finalize. If we don't like the applicant, or for some reason deny the applicant, they still would have the same appeal process, again, opportunity. I don't think we want to hold theirs until their application finishes, would be my suggestion. But it's certainly a fair question, I understand why you're asking.
I would only suggest we hold it this week until they come before us in 2 weeks, and then, I don't know.
Yeah, but let me just play this out. They come before us in 2 weeks, and we say yes, then we approve. If we say no, they still have the right of appeal and the right to continue working with a license. So if we say no, then you've effectively closed that business down until the appeal happens and is completed again. And we've seen how long this last appeal took. So swift action by the ABCC is not something I would want to place my bets on. So, and as we always have the authority at any time to pull in a license holder as the licensing authority, I wouldn't want to.
No, I don't want to create a barrier for them to do business. I'm only thinking they're going to come before us, we're going to either approve or disapprove, and I guess we have to grant them a license anyways so that they can have the appeal. Okay.
My thoughts, but yes, that's my thoughts.
There's no real guidance here, in my opinion, because we don't have experience in a case like this. So we err on the side of caution and give them the license and hope they bring forth a good candidate.
So there's still an open liquor license. Does someone want to make a motion to grant the liquor license for the Polish Club?
Can I just offer an opinion?
Please?
So I think when we denied, or the board denied, I wasn't a member then, but when you denied the manager's application, I think the club was in kind of like a little bit of turmoil due to pandemic. The club wasn't really open at all during the pandemic, just recently, this past summer. So to take away the license, I think at this point would be almost like a death knell.
I'm not suggesting we take it away.
Yeah. Well,
That's
they've
not
really
what I'm
turned the corner. They have new leadership in the club now, and it looks like they're back, back on the path to full recovery. So I would just support approving the license as
I just want to have
presented.
conversation so we know where we're at, what
And-
right thing to do.
And I want to say, for full disclosure, although we all know and we have signed the documents to attest this, I am a member of the Polish Club. I'm
Everybody
making it
raise their hands at a member, so the public knows.
Is there anybody else? So 3 of us are members of the Polish Club, but my decision here is independent of that membership. So, full disclosure. Thank you.
So a motion that we approve the liquor license for the Polish Club for 2022.
Motion made
Second.
and seconded. Any more discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The town manager will report to the board on various items of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 items to update the board on tonight. The first is an article that I shared just before the meeting, actually, and that's some good news. The state budget includes funding equal to an earmark of $150,000 for a townwide strategic plan, which is one of the board's adopted goals for the year. The timing of that worked out really well. We had a pretty tight deadline to put in a request. The board had identified that, and the delegation was able to get that into the budget. So as I noted in the email this afternoon, that will go a long way toward covering the cost of the plan, which will likely be a 1.5 to 2 year undertaking. And timing-wise, it works pretty well because we'll have time between now and May to do some fleshing out and have some cost proposals in hand to know what the cost of that project is going to be. Mr. Conley joined me and Ted Blake from the Finance Committee today for what was a very frustrating meeting this morning with Essex Tech. The admissions subcommittee met to discuss the letter we sent them in the fall, asking that they consider limiting the admissions of Danvers students on a moving forward basis. The letter this fall was a follow-up to a letter that was sent about a year and a half prior, where we raised some concerns with the accelerating number of students from our school system that were going to the tech. No real discussion based on the minutes since March of last year till now. No real discussion occurred at the admissions subcommittee. I had presented to the board in March of last year. At the very next meeting, at the very beginning of their subcommittee meeting, the chair and the superintendent and at least one other committee member were on record saying they saw no reason to change their admissions policy. That was never communicated to us. So when we followed back up, and it was mentioned to us later that there would be no change, we submitted the request, which had been suggested to us by both the superintendent and an undersecretary at DESE, that the town had the right to make a request that its population of the school be managed even if the full school committee didn't want to put an admissions policy in place pertaining to the entire district. The meeting today felt a little bit like Charlie Brown in the football. We put forward a request that they had suggested that we put forward, and then they subsequently rejected that request this morning. So we'll be meeting with the delegation and the town attorney just to get an understanding of what that means and what options we may have to discuss with this board, the school committee, and the finance committee as we start the budget process. But it was very discouraging.
So when you talk to the town attorney, can you find out, I'm sure you're going to ask these questions, but what is our opportunity when presented with a budget by Essex Tech to only fund a specific amount?
We have no ability to do that.
Okay, so
The budget is remanded back to the school committee if, I believe it's 1/3 of the weighted community vote. So the voting by community is weighted based on the number of students at the school. So it's not necessarily 1/3 of communities, it would be a weighted 1/3 vote. If 1/3 of the communities reject the budget, it goes back to the school committee. If less than 1/3 of the communities reject the assessment request, it passes anyway. And so 2 years ago, the town moved a portion of the assessment into Finance Committee reserve, making a request that the school committee consider looking at these things, which they did not do, and ultimately we had to have a Finance Committee meeting to pull the funds out. Going into the recession, you'll recall, we had started the budget process, the pandemic hit, the town, the schools, basically every entity went back and revised their budgets to make adjustments based on the reality we were facing. This board and the Finance Committee and town meeting ultimately voted to reduce the Essex Tech budget by a like amount, which was a very modest amount, and no changes were made to their budget, and we ultimately had to fund that as well. So unilaterally, very little, and this is written into the state law.
Will, after you speak to you speak to town council and others, Rodney and others, will you be reconvening the chairman of the finance committee, selectmen, and school committee to strategize or talk about
I think as needed, yeah.
next steps?
I think as needed. I think we need to understand what those look like at this point.
Because my concern is, when do we actually start pulling in our legislators?
Soon.
Saying it's unsustainable, that we don't have any ability to.
And they've been part of this process in the sense that we've had discussions with them, and they've seen all the material. So they are familiar with the situation. We've had extensive discussions about the issues that are facing the towns versus the cities. The cities have a different set of concerns, and this has been pretty widely reported in the press. This has to do with some of the guidance that DESE issued earlier this year, asking these, not mandating, but offering guidance to these school committees to really do a better job of making sure that their student populations mirror the sending communities. So Salem and Peabody, for example, their concern is that when you look at the population of students at Essex Tech from those communities, they don't look anything like the sending community. And that's different from the smaller towns, and we're a larger town, but when we see a 20% increase in our student population year over year, that has a massive impact on our budget. Same thing applies in the smaller towns. Manchester going from, say, 10 to 16 students would have a similar impact on their budget as Danvers going from 180 to 210. And again, the request 2 years ago was have a conversation about whether there's a way to offer some clarity to the sending community so that we can plan from year to year. There was not a willingness to take that step, which is why we made our subsequent request, which was then we want our population to mirror, we want our student population to mirror our sending population. And the message today was, we don't think that's acceptable either. So we're back to square one.
Thank you. Any other discussions on that topic? Thank you.
The last item that I wanted to update the board on, you received a packet on Friday based on our discussion on November 16th, including some background materials on the Community Preservation Act process that the town went through in 2016. A couple of notes. So the town ultimately, so the select board in I believe the fall of 2015 discussed putting together a committee, and then I include one of the items included here are some minutes from one of those committee meetings so that you could see who was on the committee and what the discussions they were having were. This committee examined the CPA, came back to the select board, and recommended that the select board pursue the passage of CPA first at town meeting and then at the subsequent election. It was passed by town meeting in May of 2016 and failed at referendum in November of 2016. So there are a lot of materials here. I won't walk through all those materials. One point that I called out in the cover memo, which was a point of confusion, I think, in the past, is that do the towns or cities have any control over which election a CPA question is put on? The technical answer is no, but the town or the city does have control over when the question is put before its voters, whether it be a town meeting or straight to a referendum. Because of the election cycle in Danvers, what the Secretary of State's website says is that once a question is passed by city council, a town meeting, or votes are collected by the residents to go straight to a ballot, the question has to be put on the next local or state election. So in Danvers, because we took up this question at our annual town meeting, the local election had occurred 2 weeks prior. The next available election was the November election. So there is some, towns and cities do have some latitude in timing the question, but the understanding in 2015 was that it had to go in the state election, which is technically accurate because we were aiming for the May town meeting. There was no ability to have an election prior to the state. And people had different opinions about which elections made sense, but I wanted to provide the language right off the state website so people could see for themselves the answer to that particular aspect. And at the bottom of the cover memo, I laid out a couple of questions, I think, for the board to consider probably at our next meeting based on the process we followed last time, which would be, number one, is this something that the board wants to pursue? And I think I heard at the last meeting there seems to be some support to pursue the question. The next question would be, and this is pretty consistent across the Commonwealth, is setting up a CPA committee to work on this so that it's not appropriate and it would be very uncommon for the board to be doing that work directly. So setting up a CPA committee to do the work and then agreeing on a timeline for the effort. So I'd be happy to take questions. One note I didn't include in the materials, but I was on the Community Preservation Coalition website today, and I think some or all the board members will remember that there was legislation passed in 2019 to increase the fees collected at the Registry of Deeds. The CPA is a system that local funds are matched to an extent available. They're matched with available funds at the state level, and those available funds vary based on how many communities are participating in the CPA, what the revenue collection at the Registry of Deeds looks like, et cetera. When those fees were increased, the match on the CPA went from a historic low of a little under 20% when we last discussed this topic to almost 40%. So the legislation was intended to do just that, and it worked. And I think that the number of communities is fairly stable at this point in the program. So I'll stop there.
So if we look at if we just think about the upcoming election cycles, in 2022, we have a local election, and then we'll have a state and federal election in the fall. In 2020.
Just state.
State primary and a state election.
State
Right.
primary and state election?
November is state only.
Okay, all right, thank you. 2023 is local and state again. Is that not the case?
I think that's just local.
Just local,
Just
okay.
local.
2024 is local, state, and federal because of the presidential election at that point.
I know where you're trying to get to, but
I'm just trying to figure out, so, Mr. Town Manager, can you remind us how long the last subcommittee took from the time of formation to coming back to the selectmen with their recommendation?
Not long.
it was in March of that year.
I believe the
So it's like a
committee,
month or so?
3 months.
Okay, 3
I
months.
think the committee first met maybe in January or February,
Yeah,
and it was
well,
lined up for the town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, but it's a two-step. The process is, one path is that a board puts a warrant article before its town meeting, and the town meeting can send a question to the ballot.
right.
In the event that a community either wanted to, or for example, a board was not supportive, but the community wanted to pursue the question, and I would defer to the town clerk, you could pursue, just as any other ballot question, through a petition process to place on an upcoming ballot, which would then bypass the town meeting in that
Could
scenario.
the board decide to go right to a referendum question? Or do we have to, is that path only through town meeting?
I guess the answer,
I would make the
I think
argument.
it's an atypical question. I think community members could certainly, if the board formed a committee, that committee could certainly pursue one path versus the other. But
But does getting it on the ballot require a ballot initiative with a certain number of signatures?
yes.
Okay.
So the normal process where a board is supportive would be to send it to a town meeting. But it's not, that's,
Okay, but we're, okay. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Does the board, please, Mr. Decker.
So I discussed this with the former town clerk, Joe Collins, a couple of years ago, and regarding the citizens petition to put it on the May ballot requires a collection of, I think, 5 to 10% of the signatures of registered voters.
I defer to Kathy.
And there's a very narrow window within which you can collect those signatures. It's something like maybe mid-February to the end of March. So it's only less like a 2-month window where you can get those signatures, collect them, and get them validated. So there's a significant amount of work that's involved there, but the benefit is you may not be on a November ballot where there's other, like in 2016 where there was some divisive choices there that I think trickled over and contributed to the rejection of the CPA. But maybe we could pursue that to see if it's worthwhile to do it from a citizen's petition perspective. More work than just going through the subcommittee, the board, and then to town meeting. That's
And
kind of,
I think that would be a fair question for this board to put before the CPA committee. The CPA committee would serve it at the board's pleasure, essentially. It would be board appointed. I could offer suggestions, but it would be board appointed.
So were you asking us to come back and suggest that we want to go in that direction at the next meeting, or could we, based on the way the wind was blowing previous discussions, could we say, yes, please start beating the bushes for recommendations for a subcommittee now and save us a meeting?
Yeah, my suggestion would be to put this on the December 21st agenda so that it's advertised and people are aware that it's happening. I pulled together names for the board to consider last time. I could certainly do that again, and I would suggest if folks have ideas they want to share with me, send me an email. But so the three pillars of CPA are open space / recreation, housing, and historic preservation. So, in 2015 we tried to have representation from, community leaders with experience and expertise in each of those areas, along with representation from the Finance Committee and the Select Board. So I can bring some ideas back. Ultimately, this board would vote to put that committee together. So the idea for the 21st would be, if you think of other questions based on the materials that you've received that you want to send to me, I can prepare more material for the 21st. I can come with some ideas for the board, and we could have an agenda item to discuss and consider appointment of a subcommittee.
Mr. Bennett?
Can we also find out how we can accomplish the alternative method through the use of the local ballot question petition?
Yes.
Generalized 44B, Section 3H.
Do that. And again, I think if people tomorrow or the next day think of questions or information that they'd like to have, just shoot me an email and we can pull things together for the 21st.
So if the next meeting is for the board to consider and approve the formation of a working group, would it be fair to suggest now that if people are watching or hear it in the press that they might be interested in a potential group, they should contact you?
That would be fair. Yep.
Okay. So there you have it. The board will consider whether we create a subcommittee at the next meeting. People who are interested in potentially serving on a CPA subcommittee should certainly contact the town manager to discuss that potential opportunity. I'm trying to dance carefully.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Any other questions on the town manager's reports? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for the consent calendar, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to accept it, but I have some comments on it.
Okay, so we'll start with the motion to accept. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Thank you. And your comment, sir?
Typically, we break everything out according to the licenses, and this year now you have on our agenda miscellaneous licenses, which includes entertainment and the sale of secondhand articles, which I believe is covered by bylaw number 10. And I'm not comfortable with voting for miscellaneous licenses with two distinct type of licenses. I would prefer the way it's done in the past is to break it out: entertainment, secondhand articles.
So can I ask or suggest that we're actually voting on each of the bulleted items with the identified Under common victuals licenses, common victuals, under class 1 dealers, every one of those were class 1 dealers, same thing, class 2 dealers. Under miscellaneous, each one is identified as the specific license, whether it be 7-day entertainment, codas, jukeboxes, secondhand. Does the addition of the specific license provide for you the granularity you're looking for, or would you like to see 7-day licenses in everybody's list, codas, everybody's list?
No, no, I'd like to see entertainment licenses, and I'd like to see sale of secondhand articles as two distinct groups.
And when you, just for clarity, when you say entertainment, would you also include the codas and jukeboxes in there?
I'm covering all the entertainment.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm just
Because
noticing
it's,
that.
well, it says 7-day, but then I got the codas.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I think they're all 7 days, either with a jukebox or without, with the codas or not. I don't think we need to be that granular.
Well, you've made a motion. Do you want to amend it to accept the common viculars, class 1 dealers, class 2 dealers, and then deal with the miscellaneous licenses separately? Does that give you comfort?
That's fine.
Okay, do you want to amend the motion?
I'll
you
amend the
have?
motion to accept the first 3 categories, common
So-
viculars, class 1 and class 2, as presented.
Motion made to present consent calendar for common viculars, class 1 and class 2 dealers.
Second.
And that's seconded. All in favor of that motion, or any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Now, I would prefer to just have a category in bold, entertainment, and in bold, secondhand articles, as it's been done in the past.
Okay, what if, so let me ask the town clerk, is there a timing issue if we held the rest of them in
No, I can
Until the
certainly
next
separate
meeting?
those out.
for
I
the
can
next meeting?
separate
There's,
those.
okay, there's no one
Nope,
falling off the edge
Plenty
between
of
now and the
time.
next meeting? Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Very good. We'll reconsider those under miscellaneous on the December 21st meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, now we will end with correspondence, select board new business, previous new business, updates, and select board closing comments. I'll start with select board member Mills. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment on the activities up at the Danvers Senior Center. Number one, every month, the Senior Center produces a hard copy of a newsletter and also publishes it on the internet. And it is filled with wonderfully interesting, healthy things for senior, I don't like to say aging or older, for senior people to do. For example, on Tuesday, December 21st, if you're in for roasted tom turkey and all of what goes with it, an apple pie with caramel a la mode, there is a drive-through. They're organizing a drive-through so that people can have this kind of a holiday meal together because we can't do it in person this year. On Monday, December 13th, Mr. Bradstreet and I hope many other people, will gather for the men's club, the monthly men's club, and Dick Moody is going to be our speaker. It's a wonderful little dinner. It starts at 5. We're done by 6:45. We only had about 18 people last month, and I'm going to try to talk to all of the everybody over 50 that I know and ask them to please come and give it a try. But in any event, there's the newsletter available on the internet, and among other things, there is a wonderful day program for those residents who are caregiving at home and want to have a break 1 or 2 or 3 days a week. There is a place where their loved one can go and be cared for and nurtured during the course of the day so that the caregiver can have a break. And then finally, on the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, we have a fascinating and wonderful report that has just been published. I'm so embarrassed that I don't have a copy of it, and I'm going to ask if there is some way for our meeting on December 21st that I guess we can't, I don't know if we can, at least if we, all the members of the select board have hard copies of that report, and that there's a hard copy that can be held up with a very clear indication of where on the town website people can look into this. Because I'll tell you, from where we have come and from what we're going through now, it shows a massive community commitment to human rights and inclusion with all kinds of activities, and it's a wonder to behold. Thank you.
Thank you. Select Board Member Duggan?
Thank you. So the town manager and the board already discussed the Community Preservation Act, but that's something that I think that I'm strongly in favor of. We saw what happened recently when we were unable to preserve the train station, and this would be something that would have helped us preserve it forever. But unfortunately, we don't have the funds to work with for historic preservation or even for open space if the opportunity arises. So I urge everyone to kind of get behind this. I know it seems like it is a tax, but it actually increases the value of your property to have open space and preservation of buildings. And then the other item is 80 years ago this morning was the attack on Pearl Harbor. Seems like a long time ago, but what followed that, the cohesiveness of the American society to join together. We've kind of lost sight of that in the past few years, where we're at each other's throats, so to speak. Last Friday, President Biden issued a proclamation for the National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. And I'm just going to paraphrase a couple of sentences from that. The President encourages all Americans to reflect on the courage shown by our brave warriors that day and to remember their sacrifices. And he asks us all to give sincere thanks and appreciation to the survivors of that unthinkable day. And it's something that we should keep in mind. We, earlier tonight, we talked about the remembrance of the Holocaust tragedy, and so it kind of plays together. So just keep that in mind, that we really should be all working together and not being divisive. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Select Board Member Bernard?
Let's see. So the Danvers Housing Authority is doing well. Cindy Dunn continues to have the residents wear masks, and they're doing very well. It's nice to hear that a lot of the seniors are getting vaccinated, getting their boosters, which is great. I do want to thank Rodney and John for putting together the tax classification PowerPoint. There was a few of us that sat through it. They took time out of their busy day to go through it with us. And, like we want to say is we don't want to raise taxes, residents. We try getting it as minimal as possible, but to the residents. But I just want to thank all the time and effort that you did put into it, Rodney. Thank you.
I have a couple things, and I'm going to ask Dan to end as usual. I was sorry to be out of town the past couple of weeks. Well, I was pleased to be out of town on vacation the past couple of weeks, but sorry that I missed two important events, the downtown tree lighting, which I love, and the menorah lighting, which I also attend regularly. So sorry for that. I would want to remind people that we often think at Thanksgiving of people in need. Thanksgiving's passed, but the need hasn't. And so I would ask you to consider two things. One is the Danvers People to People Food Pantry can always use donations, particularly of gift cards that can be redistributed in small denominations, but gift cards can be redistributed. I know at Thanksgiving time they shied away from actually getting turkeys because they only have so much storage space, or refrigeration and freezer storage space. So when you're out and about and you're buy a couple extra cans and drop it off at the food pantry, that would be helpful. A couple of gift cards. Need knows no season, and Christmas is also just as a time of year is needful as Thanksgiving. And to that point also, to remind people that if they would like to donate in the town hall lobby, there is a Toys for Tot donation center. You can donate an unwrapped gift, and it will be redistributed to those in need. And I would encourage people to do so. If you know, sometimes you think about it, where do I go, what to drop something off? Again, if you're out with your children and purchasing, you know, gifts, unwrapped gift, any age would certainly be welcome. So, thank you very much. And now I'll ask Select Board Member Bennett to close us out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you see a veteran, please thank them. Always remember the vets, and especially on this 80th anniversary of that horrendous attack on America's soil at Pearl Harbor. And good night, Danvers.
Thank you very much. Good night. Meeting adjourned.